Hi there, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Renaissance Space podcast. You're listening to the fourth series of the Renaissance Space podcast entitled Reading, More Than Just Words on a Page. In the second episode of the series, the ATOS Level, Margaret chats with children's author and ex-teacher Matt Beighton. They discuss the benefits of using ATOS from Renaissance to level any book. The ATOS Leveler provides an accurate level for almost any book, allowing the teacher or child to see if the book is at an appropriate level for reading based on the reader's unique reading ability. You can find a link to the Renaissance ATOS Leveler in the episode's description to start categorizing your books by ability level now. In the episode, Matt also discusses his upcoming book aimed at teachers, called Write It, Level It, Teach It. The book focuses on saving teacher workload and how to provide ability-appropriate content for every pupil. Remember, if you'd like to have your say on this episode, just pop onto Twitter, tweet your comments and include the hashtag #RenaissanceSpace in your tweet. This will allow you to join other educational professionals in discussing the podcast episodes together. And as always, please subscribe, share and leave a comment. Enjoy!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another podcast. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak to Matt Beighton, who's about to write a book. Before you tell us about the book, Matt, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Nice to see you, Margaret. My name, as I say, is Matt Beighton. I'm a children's author. I'm an ex-teacher. I was a primary school teacher for nearly a decade. Before I left to write full-time just before the pandemic hit, which was great timing to go self-employed. But so you're right. So I'm just in the process of writing a book at the moment called Write It, Level It, Teach It, which is all about model texts and how to write efficient model text and effective model texts for the classroom.
So Write It, Level It, Teach It. And, you know, writing and reading, as you will know, I'm also a primary school teacher and for nearly 10 years, a little bit older than you, but so that's quite a nice link. Obviously, we know that language, reading and writing go hand in hand and vocabulary acquisition. So clearly, this is all around that whole genre of ensuring children have the right tools to be able to read, but then write, interpret, nuance, inference, all of those good skills that go with that whole English space.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it kind of came about when I was teaching. We started using a system within the school I was working in where we were writing a lot of model texts, and I was writing children's books at the time and thought, oh, this is brilliant. I write for the Literacy Shed, reading comprehensions for the Literacy Shed. So I thought this is absolutely fine. You know, I'm brilliant at this. But it soon became apparent that actually a lot of teachers aren't confident writing these kind of creative writing texts. You know, we kind of assume that all teachers will love writing creatively, which actually just isn't true. And it's a bit of an unfair expectation, really. And so part of the thinking behind the book is how to overcome those creative obstacles, how to write model text when you're not confident, how to write them quickly and efficiently. But like you're saying, that's really where ATOS comes into it, is how to actually make sure that they are at a level that the children can access, a reading level that the children can access. I know when I was teaching, certainly for the first few years, it wasn't something really that I considered, or any teachers that I worked with really considered, with the texts that we were writing within the classroom and putting in front of children. What reading level were they at? Were they actually at a reading level that the children could access? And so that kind of became the crux of the book, really, which is where the level it comes from in the title.
Fantastic. So just to backtrack a little bit for people who don't know what ATOS is. So ATOS is actually a Renaissance piece of software. It's freely available. We can talk about it a little bit more in a moment. But basically what it enables anybody to do is to put a piece of text or a book into a search engine online, and it will level it for you. So basically what you're suggesting is that teachers sometimes fall into the trap of expecting children's reading to be at a level that the teacher is writing at, which is obviously a huge pitfall.
Yeah, exactly. And I was as guilty as anybody. You know, when I first started doing this, I put through some of the year 6 model texts I'd written for my class, and the reading age was coming out as year 7 or year 8. And conversely, you know, some were coming out as year 2 and year 3 because I'd oversimplified it. So we kind of, I think as teachers, we sometimes get carried away with trying to cram everything into a model text, everything that the child needs to know, every grammar objective, every vocabulary objective, everything they need to know into one text. And before you know it, you've kind of written an equivalent of Lord of the Rings or Tolstoy, something like that. You know, it's you kind of don't realize, and it's even harder further down the school, to get it to that level. So if you're not aware of what the levels are that you're putting in front of the children, it can lead to problems. And that's what the book discusses as well, with engagement and behavior and access.
Absolutely. So the example I often give is actually maths problems. So, you know, are you testing the children's reading, or are you testing the children's maths ability in what you're writing? So absolutely spot on in terms of making it not too simple. It's a bit like the Vygotsky approach too with the ZPD, isn't it? You know, not too easy and not too hard. Don't want to frustrate and don't want to bore. So
finding that kind of golden zone, isn't it, really? The golden
Exactly.
But it's quite, like you say, quite interesting with maths, because you know, there's the SATs data that is on the Renaissance website, I believe, and the analysis of the 2019 SATs. And the maths paper comes out as a reading, well, an ATOS score of grade 6, which is kind of year 7 reading age for the year 6 maths paper. So it's not just about writing. It's not just about the English SATs papers, like the reading. You know, the maths SATs paper as well has got a reading age way above, really, where they're going to be.
And I think that's also really pertinent at secondary level, because I do think more so when you're specializing in a subject area, you know, English teachers are charged with making sure that the children can read. Whereas actually, if they're going to sit GCSE papers at some point, it's just as important for the history, geography, language departments to fit that right level in too.
I'm a huge fan, obviously, of kind of getting great texts into classrooms. You know, there are fantastic books out there, mid-grade books for children, but they tend to be written with a reading level of kind of around about year 4, because, you know, they're accessible to the lower end. So certainly when I started investigating this for the book, some of the books that we read in year 6 in particular, the kind of reading level is only down at year 4. It's more the content and the kind of reading interest that pushes them up. And you kind of, that was a bit of an eye-opener for me, a bit of a light bulb moment. And you think, well, actually, these books are not going to be filling that reading level gap. That's got to come from the model text that the teachers are writing and from the content that we put in front of them as teachers, because as amazing as these books are, they're not filling that reading level gap. They'll certainly fill the vocabulary and they'll do all of those kind of things. But actually, for the reading level, they're not at that level.
So that's quite important for us as well, because I don't know if you know, but Accelerated Reader, for example, we obviously level all of the books before they're quizzed so that they're pitched at the right level for the children. And ATOS is actually the software that determines that. So it takes the text, it looks at the language complexity, the length of sentences. And again, you know, we've done a lot of research on this, and there was quite a bit of media interest a couple of years ago with our What Kids Are Reading report, where we were talking about Mr. Greedy being at the same level as Of Mice and Men.
Yeah, I remember that.
But it was not at reading level. It was reading understanding, but not complexity of concepts, because obviously you wouldn't be putting a John Steinbeck in the same hands as a child who'd be reading a Mr. Men book. Yeah,
I think it's the same as the difference between decoding and comprehension, really, isn't it? You know, when I was in my final year of teaching, I taught a girl who was EAL, and she could decode any kind of year 6 text I put in front of her absolutely brilliantly. But her comprehension, because she didn't understand the language, wasn't there. But if I put a year 4 text in front of her, she could comprehend it. So there is a huge difference, I think, like you say, with Mr. Greedy and Of Mice and Men, between that decoding ability and the comprehension ability. And like you say, with kind of the language structure and the kind of devices used by the author. And I always, I ran a training session for teachers on this at the beginning of the first lockdown. And the big point really that I kind of made is when you're writing your text, you've got to think about context as well, because you are going to write text as a teacher, I think, that have a much lower reading level. If you're writing for year 6 and you're writing suspense, it's going to be full of short, sharp sentences because that's the devices you need to use. So it might have a reading level of year 3. That's fine, so long as you are aware. And one of the things I talk about in the book is just keeping a track of the reading levels of the texts you put in front of your children, so that you can see, oh, actually, for the last few months, we've only done year 3 level texts with our year 5 children. Maybe we need to up it a little bit for the next few.
And of course, that goes hand in hand with when teachers are reading to children, that they're also challenging them. I'm always a little saddened when I hear teachers saying, oh, we're reading Roald Dahl. Lovely. And obviously, who wouldn't want to read Roald Dahl? But often the children will read those themselves because they're excited about them and they know about the films. And so I think your point about making sure the right amount of challenge is in there excites them and keeps them. And if it's being read for them, then it gives them that extra level. Yeah,
and it removes that bit of a barrier, doesn't it, sometimes? And you can access more high-level texts. And it's the same, I think, with talking to the children, being a teacher as a reader. I think sometimes we get a little bit afraid as teachers and feel we can only talk to children about children's books. We can only kind of say, oh yeah, I love reading mid-grade books. I don't think there's anything wrong really with showing the children that you love to write, you like to read thrillers, or, perhaps not 50 Shades of Grey, but, you like to read crime books, or you like to read biographies. You're not saying that they need to read them, but showing them that actually there is a whole gamut of books out there that isn't just, like you say, Roald Dahl, or ones that they have kind of sometimes narrowly channeled into by marketing and media and big shelves in bookshops and things like that.
Our solutions helped over 1.6 million British and Irish students in the last academic year alone and are currently implemented in over 50,000 schools worldwide. For more information on our programs, the research behind them, and how we can help you help your students, please get in touch or visit our website at www.renlearn.co.uk/solution.
So going back to ATOS, I know when we first spoke earlier in the summer, you were talking about how you discovered it and how it had sort of influenced some of your thinking around levelling and how it should be thought about by teachers and teaching staff.
Yeah, so I write a lot of reading comprehensions for the Literacy Shed. And as part of that, we wanted to make sure that the texts we were writing for these reading comprehensions were at the correct reading level for the children. So, if you go there are year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on, all the way up to year 6 at the moment. And we used a variety of systems. We even, looked at kind of putting together our own. But when I kind of stumbled across ATOS, it works. It's freely available for teachers, which is a huge bonus. It kind of needs something that actually is available and that isn't going to cost the earth. But it's consistent as well, and it works. So, I've written, I think, over 550, nearly 600 texts now, and you can see the consistency across. I can pick up 2 texts that are at the same level and know that's how it, that they are at the same level.
Wow.
So I just think, of all the systems that we tried, ATOS proved to be the most effective and the most efficient. And like you say, it's freely available for teachers as well. So we can kind of say, if you want to do your own, have a look at it's not just actually what the teachers write. Have a look at what your children are writing. Have a look at the reading level of what your children are actually writing. Because one of the things I pick up on in the book is there is a huge discrepancy between the end of year 6 writing expectations, the reading level of Morgan and Lee and all of those people that the government give you as exemplars, and actually what the reading expectations are. There's a huge difference. The writing level is way higher. The reading level of what they are writing is way higher.
So ATOS offers 2 platforms or 2 scenarios for you to use when you log on to the ATOS software. Can you just talk about that for a moment, please?
Yeah, so there's a as far as I'm aware, there's the ATOS for text, and then there's the ATOS for books, which is kind of for complete books. And there's a difference between them. I think the ATOS for text system, what that tends to do is look at the text as though it was a part of a whole, as part of a bigger whole. And I find that tends to run a little bit higher, which is great if you are just taking a snippet of something. So if you're taking a snippet of a book that you want to use with your class and you want to see kind of where the reading level of that snippet is, that's a great way of looking, okay, that's kind of the average. And the ATOS for book system, which is what I use, just uses that text. So if you've written 500 words, 400 words, however long your text is, and you put it into the ATOS for books system, that will just treat it as an independent 400, 500 words and give you a reading level or a reading grade for that.
And that's because what it's doing is looking at the whole piece of text. It can take all of the language, all of the nuance, everything that it wants to. Whereas, as you say, the little snippet or the paragraph can only base it on that bit of information or the bit that's been put in there.
Yeah, and it does make a difference. And they both have really vital uses. And it's just making sure you're using kind of the right one for what you think. And if you're using one and it seems particularly high, have a look at the other one. Because when I use the text one, it comes out a lot higher, and I kind of think, oh, okay, let's have a look at the books one. And that was actually after speaking to one of your amazing tech people at Renaissance, and they kind of taught me through it.
So your book, let's just have a little synopsis of that. So how's that going to be laid out? How are you going to offer that out into the marketplace?
So it's split up into 3 sections. Like the title says, write it, level it, teach it. So the first kind of section will be all about, this concept of model text and where we create content. Like you said, Margaret, it's not just in English lessons. It's maths lessons, it's word problems for maths subjects. How often are the children struggling to just comprehend the question rather than actually doing the maths? But also, I used to sit there as a teacher sometimes, and I would spend hours looking for a specific text about, I don't know, gorillas or something that was at just the right level, that had just the right vocabulary in it, that just the right information. And you'd either end up just settling for something that wasn't quite what you wanted, or you'd kind of send the children off onto the internet to have a look, and they'd end up just copy and pasting from Wikipedia. And so, part of my argument is actually, if you follow some of the tips that I give in the kind of third section, the teach it section, which is all about saving time, you can actually write your own much quicker and get it at the right level for your class with the right things for your class, without having to scour the internet. I'm not saying do it every time. There is certainly a place for downloading and using other people's resources. Of course there is. It's a great time saver and it's important. But if you're doing that every time, or if you're kind of wasting time doing that when you could be just writing your own a lot quicker and a lot more effectively, that's kind of the section that really starts it. And then we talk about using the ATOS system, or using various systems, and kind of how to use them to, if your levels are coming out too low, if your levels are coming out too high, how to change your text and what it's really looking at and how to impact that. And then the third section, which I think is perhaps one of the most important for teachers sometimes, is overcoming that creative block. How, if you're not a creative person, or if you struggle with creative writing, how do you overcome that? And there's a lot of exercises in there to help with that, and also how to save time.
Yeah. And anything that's going to save time and support teacher workload and all of those elements that, I think during lockdown have easily been forgotten, not by the workforce, but by outside agencies who, you were just at home. I think that just is not quite the right word.
Well, when I ran a training session for teachers on this at the beginning of the first lockdown, I sent out a questionnaire, and I think that there were just over 100, and I think about 130 respondees. And actually the information was really, really interesting. Of those people that responded, nearly 60%, well, actually nearly 80% are writing a model text at least once a fortnight. Okay, 50% are writing one at least once a week. And nearly 70% are taking at least an hour to write that model text. So if you're spending an hour to write a model text and you're having to do that 2 or 3 times a week, that's a huge burden. Part of my kind of not quite a promise, but one of the things I'm saying in this book is actually, you can get that down to 10, 15, 20 minutes. Because ultimately, at the end of this unit of writing with your children, you're going to sit those children down and say, right, you've got 45 minutes to write your own version of what I've given you, your adapted, innovated, whatever language you want to use. And if it's taking you an hour or an hour and a half, how are the children going to write it in 45 minutes? Yeah. There's something not quite right there. So there has to be a huge time saving there, because it can't be taking people 3 or 4 hours to write 3 or 4 model texts over a week. And that's certainly the response I've got, which I think is a huge burden that we can help to alleviate.
So I think teachers are going to be welcoming the publication of your book. And I also think it's important that we recognise just how much teachers do beyond turning up every day, all of that planning and all of that research and anything that can sort of help that. And certainly with Accelerated Reader, for example, I often will say to teachers, why not use the quizzes as part of your teaching? Get the quiz up on the board, talk about the book. We've just read this book together. What do you think the author's doing here? That's all been done for you. So if you are a school and you're listening to this and you've got Accelerated Reader, you have got all of those quizzes, nearly 40,000, that you could be unpicking and unpacking and using to support your children's understanding of reading.
Yeah, and that's it's completely true. And there are other resources. That's one of the reasons why with the Literacy Shed we wanted to make sure they were right, they were leveled at the right level, so that teachers can take those and know that they're ready to go. Because the burden, the workload is huge on teaching. It's only got worse through lockdown. Despite what people may think, it has got hugely. My wife's a high school teacher and she's been absolutely swamped. I'm still obviously good friends with a lot of the teachers I work with. They're all absolutely at the end of their rope. Yes.
Looking forward to the next few weeks off.
Yes.
Which we're talking now in July. So when is your book being published? When is it going to be released?
Spring next year at the moment. So I will be finished it by the end of this year. I'll be finished writing it by then. And it will be released by Sage Publishing next spring.
Fantastic. So what we should do then is maybe drip feed in a few tweets and a few social media posts to warm people up. We can certainly publish this podcast. But then maybe we should have you back once it's been out a couple of months or so and see how it's going.
Brilliant. That would be fantastic. I'm hoping to get the cover soon. I can't wait to get the cover and see what the cover looks like. It's one of those small things that actually I think is one of the most exciting things about writing a book, isn't it? Is getting the cover.
Absolutely. Well, and if you're allowed to share that cover, then send us a copy and we'll see what we can do to promote it as well. So, Matt, thank you so much. It's been really interesting. I love the fact that ATOS is doing its job for more than just Accelerated Reader, which was obviously what it was originally designed for. Yeah. I'm a great advocate of it. It's one of Renaissance's best kept secrets. So to have somebody approach me and say, ATOS, tell me something more about it, is just wonderful.
No, thank you, and like I say, thank you to the team behind it as well. It's a brilliant system. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and then there's no hurdles. You don't have to register to use it, as far as I'm aware. You just go to the web page, put your text in, get a result, and off you go. It is as simple as that. It takes seconds to level, which is why I'm such a big advocate of using this system, because like I say, I'm all about saving time, and if it took 10 minutes, I wouldn't bother. So
great, thank you. That's really helpful. Enjoy the summer. I know you've just come back from a week away, but this weather, I'm sure, is conducive to some beach visits and everything else that holidays.
Not sitting in a study writing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the ATOS Level episode of the Renaissance Space podcast. Remember, you can use the ATOS Leveler right now entirely for free with no registration required on the Renaissance website. Find the link in the episode description. If you enjoyed the episode or have anything to say around the topic, get onto Twitter and use the hashtag Renaissance Space to have your say. And, as always, please subscribe to and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. For updates on upcoming episodes of the Renaissance Space Podcast, you can follow Margaret and me on Twitter. You can find our social media handles in the summary description section of the episode. Thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space Podcast, please check out the Education Joining the Dots podcast from our colleagues at GL Assessment. Thank you.